Many of us sound awkward when we're soloing because we're trying to play outside, but there's context that we're not taking into consideration. So let's get some consideration for these contexts, but I'm also going to be assuming that you've seen the previous videos in this series, or you're understanding the idea that we're basing our solos off of pentatonics and adding in flavor tones. The first thing I want to discuss is pitch access theory, which is you can play any scale or any arpeggio based off of one note. So let's say our bassist is playing a C note. Right? I can play a C major scale right now. Right? Or harmonic minor. Sounds fine. Or maybe Lydian. Notice, none of them sounded awkward. It's because there's only one note being played. And because there's only one note being played, there's nothing to bump up against. Now, this is normally called droning. A good way of practicing this is finding a backing track somewhere that says C drone or D droning backing track, and start to experiment with all the pentatonics and flavors that we were discussing beforehand. What we want to do is gain a good grasp of how these sound and go between all of them to see how will they flow. When we start to play more notes, that's where we start to find more walls. So let's talk about static chords. So we have our bassist playing a C, right? But now we can afford a guitar player, and the guitar player is playing a C minor. Now, because they're playing more notes, our scale that we're about to play is going to be compared to that chord because that chord is always being played. This is important to understand because it's going to limit what scales we can and cannot play. So if they're playing some sort of C minor chord, we have to play some sort of C minor bass scale or arpeggio. If we start to play major, you're going to hear what happens. So let's look at them. So let's say I have a C minor going. I could play Dorian and be perfectly fine. Sounds fine. Or Phrygian. Silent, sounds fine. Minor. Sounds fine. Right? As long as I'm matching the minors with the minors. The colors and the flavors, we can put wherever we want because there's nothing to bump up against. But let's say we play a major. And I play this F sharp. Ooh, that's not working out too well. It's because that's a wall that we can't really mess with right now. So what we're going to start to do is now analyze major walls. So our bassist is still playing C, right? And now our chord player is playing a C major type chord. Well, now I can play with those flavors, like a mixed Lydian type flavor. Or a Lydian flavor. All sound perfectly fine. Now, there is one particular thing that we can do though here. We can actually start to play a minor. Now, what does that do? Ooh, that's interesting. That doesn't sound good, but that starts to imply something that we need to start analyzing. So if we're playing a C major chord, right, and then we start to play a C minor pentatonic, we're going to play a 1, a flat 7, a 5, a 4, a flat 3, and then a 1 again. But we have to analyze how this is being heard. Against the C major chord, a C minor pentatonic, that 1 to flat 7, that flat 7 sounds more like a flavor. Okay, and then we have our 5, landing tone. We have a 4, a flavor again. But when we hit this flat 3, it's not being heard as a flat 3, it's being heard as a sharp 9. And that implies a dominant chord because we were just playing a flat 7 in our scale, and then we're playing a regular 3 in our chord. We hear a dominant 7 chord now. But when we play the sharp 9, that's the chord we hear. And this is actually normal for us because we hear it so often. This actually starts to sound stable. Think of a Stevie Ray Vaughan, Albert King type situation. So as long as we understand the situation we are in, we can actually go in and out of different types of colors because of the context that's happening. We understand we are in a bluesy situation, we are playing a static dominant chord, and we can play all these cool tones because we are in this situation. We're not just throwing colors all over the place. We know exactly where we are and we know exactly what we're doing. Now we have more context. We have chord and genre. I'm seeing that I'm in a blues situation, playing a dominant chord, and we could play a minor pentatonic, and it will be interpreted as a sharp 9. And it's normal in this situation. Jazz guys have very similar ideas. Every single time they see a major chord, they're going to try to play some sort of Lydian flavor. Every time they see a minor chord, they're going to play some sort of Dorian flavor. Well, that's totally fine if it's in that particular genre. And that's where a lot of us start to trip up, because we're trying to put these particular ideas everywhere. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Make sure that you have the right context to add these flavors in. So we still have our guitar player playing a C chord, but our bassist starts adding in new notes, something like this. A, B flat, C. Well, they're adding in a flat 7. Does this matter? Yeah, because they're adding in information. All the notes that the whole band is playing has to be put into context. So everyone's ear is now expecting you to be using some sort of flat 7 flavor. Do you have to? It's just highly suggested that you do, because we all have to match with our flavors. We just can't throw all these things all over the place because we can. We want to make sure we're matching first, so that way when we decide not to match, we know what in the world we're doing. So let's analyze another situation. Our chord player is playing a C, and goes to D minor, back to C. Now this is important because all of our landing tones, passing tones, and leading tense tones have just changed position. Now, there's two ways we can handle this. We can play over the overall flavor profile that they're using, or we can change for each chord. For right now, I'm going to suggest that we use the overall flavor chord. So in this case, a key that would go from C to D minor would be Ionian or major, or another one would be Mixolydian. So we got to make sure that we match our flavors, because that's what the chord player is implying. Now, I'm going to really emphasize here that when in Rome, do as the Romans. So if you're in a pop situation, use the pop flavors. When you're in a blues situation, use blues flavors. Now, you might be able to mix and match because blues is what most of Western music is based around. So you might get away with it. But you're going to notice trying to put jazz into these situations may not work because they're too foreign. Our audience isn't used to hearing these kind of whacked out tones, so they're not going to be able to understand what it is that you're playing. You also have to remember that most people aren't there to hear the guitar player. They're there to hear the singer. So make sure you are pleasing their ear, and I promise you they'll listen to you more. Another thing we have to take into consideration is purists. So for example, jazz guys really don't like it when you're playing pentatonics. I know they will say that, hey, it's okay to play a pentatonic. I get yelled at every single time I go to a jazz club and play a pentatonic. And prog rock guys, they want to make everything super complicated. Think about your audience. You don't have to invent a new note every single time you play a solo. Make sure people understand you. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't go outside or do crazy things. Make sure they understand you. So how are most people claiming that they're going outside? Well, I am personally frustrated by this because a lot of people are just, one, lying, or two, over-exaggerating how good they sound. So many people who claim they're going outside are just throwing notes everywhere and they just sound like crap and nobody has the heart to tell them. The other one is they are playing too fast for anyone to notice. So let's say we're in the key of C. And what the person will do is they'll play a really fast, right? They'll do like a C Lydian thing that's so fast no one can hear it. The sharp 4 wants to turn to the 5, so it kind of sounds weird. And they'll keep doing this over and over and over again, but it's so fast, it doesn't matter, or they'll grace note it. So a grace note is, it doesn't have any rhythmic value. It's so fast, no one can hear it, and they'll claim, ha, I went outside. Okay, congratulations.